welcome to Artificially Intelligent, the podcast where a white comedian, me, speaks with a black musician, him. I'm going to guess that because as I stare at the screen, you're on my left, so I'm going to point to my right, and that's usually hi, Barrett Antar Goodwin. I'm Nathan Timmel. And then we have another comedian with us, Mr. Mike Geeter. Hello.
Hello. How are you guys?
And although we didn't listen to it, Barrett, you sent a new theme song. Does it have a title? You just put AI theme. Is that literally what it is? Did you whip it up for this, or is that an old idea you had?
I just kind of was doing something, and it just came out. It's funny. I had a very silly thought. Do we have a topic for the day?
Kind of, not really.
I feel like I'm a little bit loud.
No, you're not.
Is it okay? Cool.
No. And if you are, loud is better because you're usually too quiet. Here is what I thought the topic could be. I met Mike in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And one thing I remembered about his act, or the reason I liked him, is on stage, he talked about his life. And I think I've made it clear on this podcast or in other places that, you know, all comedy is good. I enjoy comedy. I enjoy original comedy. But what resonates with me is when the comedian gets off the stage, I know a little something about them. It's not, hey, isn't Uber crazy or airline peanuts or whatever. It's talked about his life, talked about his daughter, talked about who he was as a person, so that by the time he was done on stage, I had a sense of who he was. And to translate that across all art is what I thought the topic would be. Just so it's a fluid topic. The idea of, and it's all subjective. Is personal art better, or do you think there should be a distance between a musician and the audience, depending on, like, I don't think anybody listens to, and I'm just pulling this out of my ass, the Spice Girls Wannabe and really connecting to it. Sure, they bounce it, you can dance to it, you bounce, you see it, it's catchy, you whatever, but when it's done, it's like Chinese food, you're hungry again. And I read an article about songs that have earworms where you fixate on them because they're so catchy, but at some point they just sort of saturate and you lose all interest, and then they become sort of like Spice Girls where you hear them every so often, you're like, oh, I remember that song, but it's not something you choose to put on. You don't go into the collection, you know. Just jumping off there, what are thoughts regarding poetry, music, comedy, the idea of what you respond to or like, or what you try to bring to your own respective mediums of art? Both of you speak at once, quickly.
Would you like to go first?
I have so much to say that I'd rather you go first, because I just tend to just talk nonstop once I start. So better to give you a head start.
Okay. I mean, I can't imagine doing any kind of art, because I write poetry as well, and, you know, songs and stuff, and short stories, without my perspective. It doesn't make, to me, to write a joke that has nothing to do with me, that I can't relate to. It almost seems like cheating. It almost seems like I'm putting on this facade. I know there are ways, you know, certain people do care, like Gilbert Gottfried and Bobcat Goldthwait. They do these characters that are distanced from who they are as individuals.
If I could interrupt really quickly, for anybody that doesn't know, both Gilbert and Bobcat off stage are so soft spoken. It is, if you don't know that, it could give you whiplash. So that's what you meant, I believe.
Exactly. And I just, when I first took to the stage and all that 9 years ago, I had a pretty decent set, and a local comedian came over to me. I was over in Canada, actually, going over there every weekend, performing in front of 200, 250 people. And I had this killer set. I was very proud of it. Guy pulls me aside. He goes, hey, man, I really like your material. You seem polished. You seem confident on stage. But look around the room. What do you notice? And I'm like, I notice a lot of people. He goes, no, no, really look. And he says, you're the only Black person in this room. 250 people. These people, you know, Kim Kardashian, that's great. That joke's great. I love it. But these people want to know who you are. They want to know about your politics and what you think about love and work and raising kids. Talk more about that. And it hit me like, okay, this guy's 100% right. My entire set had nothing to do with me. It's just me up there telling jokes. And what I learned was the difference between telling jokes and delivering a joke, and telling stories. And I love to tell stories. And everything that I talk about comes from a real place, comes from a real incident that happened.
Yeah.
And I just add to it as comics, you know, are prone to do. And
you're building, so you have a foundation of truth, and then you add little accoutrements to the truth. Yeah.
And this is a lot easier to remember a story that happened versus something that didn't.
Yep.
It's just a lot easier. So one thing leads to another, leads to, you know how this whole set thing goes. But it was the same for me in poetry. Whenever I would write when I was inspired by something, usually heartache or something crazy like that. And I was able to get it out of my head and onto paper. So I just can't imagine doing any kind of art where I'm distanced from it. It'd be like a rapper singing country. Not that it can't happen. I mean, we do have Little Nas X.
Well, now all country sings rap. Yeah, it's called hip hop, and I've seen it, and it's pretty horrible. So before Barrett jumps in, I guess, how do I phrase it? Because I've seen comedians that, as I've said, I'm not going to name names or anything. There's no point, but that I don't want to say put a barrier up, but do the Kim Kardashian jokes and or the Uber jokes, and Barrett, I lost where I was going. If I recover, I'll jot it down. But you said you were going to start talking for too long, so jump on in.
Well, one, I want to hear the Kim Kardashian joke.
From 9 years ago.
Yeah, no, that was long gone.
Actually, you know what? I just realized something. Yeah, you said you started and that was the open mic. Isn't it sad that Kim Kardashian has been in the national consciousness for over 9 years? That is an indictment of the United States, that we have allowed her to remain on television and not collectively gone, can we change the channel? I digress.
Well, one, I mean, real kudos to the cat who pulled you aside and said that.
Yes.
You know, because sometimes these little simple things in life, somebody says you can do something, someone says you can't do something. It makes all the difference in the world, right? Like just a little bit of direction. So it's really cool that whatever it was, even when you're doing Kim Kardashian jokes and shit like that, that like there was a spark there that somebody saw, that they felt it was worth it to take the time to say something to you. Because a lot of times, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of times I see people who could use something and I'm like, yeah, it's not worth it.
Well, or not only that,
or sometimes I do say something, but you know.
Sometimes people would be too threatened, like, ooh, you know, he's got good jokes. That's a threat to me, so I'm not going to say anything. Let him do these Kim Kardashian jokes as opposed to, it's an interesting thing. And, you know, I can think of many times in my life where somebody saying some random thing made all the difference in the world, you know? So I think it's really cool that somebody took the time to say that to you. I feel like this is one of those things that it ties into the art versus commerce thing in a weird way. Not versus, but how do you balance the two, right? Like when your art becomes personal, for me, I'll speak for me, right? When my art becomes personal, what I get from it supersedes any kind of economic thing, right? And when I do commerce art, as much as it's fun, it's like, yeah, pay me,
right? Like, yes, this is here. I'm here to do a job. Pay me. But when I'm really doing something where I'm expressing myself, I still want to get paid. But the truth is that like it does cause a little bit of a balance, right? An imbalance, right? Like for me, and maybe that's just my issue, you know what I mean? But I feel like there's something to be said for that. What were you gonna say?
Well, I had a thought that I thought it a minute ago. I think the separation can come in, and I don't know, Mike, if you are lucky enough to have this. I do not. Barrett, you could be on the cusp of it, but I think that's the difference between the artist and the manager, where from everything I've read is the manager handles all the busybody shit so that the artist can focus on the art. And if there needs to be a fight with the venue about payment or the record company or anything, it's that's the buffer, is the manager has to talk to the artist about it, but the artist gets to go, all right, you deal with the shit and then come to me when, it's then you and I can have a private conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you think that would be the
I mean, I think that that becomes a really necessary agent. I think you're right. I think to a degree, because I think that when you do get on stage, I mean, and I feel like also, right, which is really the point of what we're talking about, not even art and commerce and how they blend or whatever, but more like the point of engagement with people is when they see your humanity and connect it with theirs somehow, right?
Yeah.
That's the point of engagement, right? Which is why when you're talking about the Spice Girls, listen, I love the Spice Girls. That's one of my favorite songs, Wannabe, all that stuff, right?
Oh, I wanted to make a joke. It's not funny, but I heard the song come on a couple weeks ago, and I actively had the thought that I am at an age where I don't know if I actually like a song that just came on or if I just relate to it out of nostalgia. And it was
Right.
because of the Spice Girls. Like Wannabe came on, and I
Mm.
remember when that song came out, I did not like it. But the other week, I'm like, oh yeah, a little catchy tune. I'm like, wait a second,
Right.
do I actually like the song, or does it just remind me of a time period?
I
That's
mean,
how old I am.
I've I've played that song several times at several weddings and
Yeah, I was
things
gonna
like
say you
that.
were in a wedding band.
People,
You have to.
yeah, like I've played that song. So, and you should see people lose their minds. Dudes, women, everybody, they're all just doing the dances and singing the songs. It is absolutely hilarious.
I was at a wedding
Really.
recently, and I couldn't tell you the song that was on before. I at the time I made note like, oh, that song brings everybody to the dance floor. And the instant they started Bon Jovi, the dance floor cleared out. I'm like, oh, well, that was kind of neat. I kind of made me
Oh,
amused.
look at you
Yeah,
being a dick. You not liking
So
old
I guess
Bon
time to go
Jovi.
smoke weed at that point.
yeah.
Yes.
It's not that I don't like old Bon Jovi. I never liked any Bon Jovi.
You're funny.
Dun, 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 dun. She's a little runaway. Oh, fuck off.
Oh, get you.
Anyway,
Well, I mean, but like say take something like that. For you, there's no human connection when you hear Bon Jovi songs.
right.
There's nothing about that song that makes you feel like you're in touch with your humanity. Like I feel like that's what great art does, right? Or even just art in general, right? You look at it and it reminds you of your own humanity because you see yourself in this other person's story. They make you see
Exactly.
something that you don't see about yourself. They give you some words to say something that
Yeah.
you like thoughts that you grapple with in your head that they're just like foggy somehow. You listen to these lyrics and then all of a sudden it makes sense, or a poem, or you see a painting. I've never had that experience with a painting. I don't really get it. I get like I
I've had
mean
paintings I like, but yeah, I've never really like a song
yeah,
can make the hair on my arms do Spider-Man, like my spidey senses, but a
yeah,
painting is not. I can appreciate and enjoy, but I hear what you're saying.
yeah. But I mean, but
Yeah.
some people can. That's
Yeah.
not my thing, but some people can, and I kind of envy them in a weird way because I wish I could look at a painting and have this kind of religious experience that I get like when I look at actual nature or when I listen to music, you know. Like
Well,
music makes me do that most.
I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this or put it. I had a thought um, involving what you connect to, because to me, like you and I have talked about this in the past. The Red Hot Chili Peppers. Anthony Kiedis is not a good singer by, if you break it down, like if he were on American Idol, he would get booted. But when he sings with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, it makes sense because he's singing from the heart, and you buy it. You're like, oh, I agree with that. I can hear that. And whether or not you like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, you get a sense that he is invested in those songs, even if he can't hit the notes that Whitney Houston can hit.
Yeah.
Conversely, I've not heard a lot of Justin Bieber, but when I do, I to me, my ears, and maybe others, and this is, I'm not trying to judge, but maybe others do feel the connection. It sounds artificial to me. So given my insulting of Bon Jovi earlier, I mean, I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this, but like, it's just basically judgment and what you connect to and why you connect to it. And I honestly get confused if I hear someone, like, I get the idea of, yeah, Bon Jovi party, and then you go home, but I don't get the idea of really connecting to it and finding meaning in it the way you would Peter Gabriel or Miles Davis or anything like that. Does that make sense? It confuses me.
I mean, everything to me is it's relatable. What's relatable, and setting comedy to the side. Music. I mean, like for me, I can listen to an Andrea Bocelli song, not understand a word that he's saying. I can listen to Les Nubian, not understand a word that they're saying. I can listen to any kind of music, world music, and not understand. They don't have to sing English at all, but the tone in their voices, the music that's behind it, it impacts me. It touches me. Same thing with poetry, same thing with paintings. I've seen some paintings that were just like, wow, this is incredible. Just how for me, it's more of a, how the conception of it, the medium that they use. That's the part that moves me. With comedy, I used to, before I got into comedy seriously, it was, this person's not funny. That person isn't funny. But everyone has an audience. Everyone has a following. I don't care if they're the greatest comedian in the world or they're just moderate. What I've learned to say is that person and I can't relate to what they're saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not funny. It's just, to me, there's nothing that they're saying that is relatable. And I think that's being relatable is what works with all medium, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's comedy, whether it's sports, whatever. You have to be able to relate to whomever you're rooting for, whomever you like. Bieber, he has some jams. It's true. It does sound
not the ones I've heard, but go ahead.
Right. They're canned and manufactured and so on. But I don't understand a lot of today's music. And, I don't get Lil Nas X. I get what he's doing, but his music just doesn't, where I'm just going to say, oh, I have to listen to Nas X. It's a Nas X Saturday. That's not going to happen.
Is that Old Town Road? Is that who that is?
Yes.
Okay. I knew that song was popular for about, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks before I actually heard the song. And the only way I heard the song is my daughter had a friend over, or 2 friends over. Either way, my daughter was 8 at the time, or 7. I don't know, whatever old she was. And they said, hey, personal assistant device, whose name I don't want to use because then she'll go off in the background, play that song. And they all started singing, and I'm like, it's a kid's song. Literally, it's a kid's song. It's not that different from Round the Rosie, or and that's when I, because they were all singing, and doesn't he say booty in the song, or my butt or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and they all just screamed that and then giggled, and I'm like, and yep, and it was very much a youth song. And that's who relates to it. And I'm not saying that Barrett's laughing. I wasn't saying that to be insulting. He tapped into that.
But I mean, it does beg the question, when I was 7 or 8, my favorite my favorite song was Celebration by Kool and the Gang.
Mhm.
That's my favorite song when I was a young person. My next favorite songs were things that I'd hear that like my father would play, like in the car, like I'll Take You There or stuff like that. Stuff that was
Mhm.
from his generation a little bit. But when I started buying my own music, it was pretty shitty. Like it's pretty bad. Like
Oh,
whatever semblance of reasonable taste I have in music was drilled into me by my parents. It wasn't my own choices. My own choices were just shit. They really were like to the point where I won't even tell you some of them
oh, I'll tell you
because
all
like,
mine because
oh,
I
I
not
won't
only
tell
am
you
I
mine because
embarrassed
they
by
were,
mine,
oh my god,
but what
wow.
I find amusing and mine was 80s hair metal. And
Oh boy.
yeah, I'm okay. Now
Well,
I can listen to a song or two here or there for nostalgia purposes, but I can't listen to an entire album anymore. It just doesn't happen. But what I find insane is the dummies I went to high school with who still listen to that shit. It's like that was the mode they got stuck in. They never moved from the small town we grew up in. They never expanded their interests or minds. And they would contact me and like, oh, they're doing a tour that I can't even think of who, like Slayer. And I'm like, all right, if Slayer signs a contract that says they won't play anything after 1987, sure, I might be interested, but I'm not interested in anything they did in the 90s. Or I'll tell you one more quick story. We didn't have kids yet, so it would have been 2009 or 10, maybe something like that. Motley Crue was on tour, and I had a little bug in my ass to see him. I'm like, Motley Crue's on tour, that'd be fun. And I started looking them up in Minneapolis and St. Louis and the places that were really close, Chicago. And the tickets were all like 45, $50. I'm like, not worth it. And then they came to Davenport, Iowa, 45 minutes away. And I guess the sales were not good because they offered a 4-pack for $80 or $20 a ticket, 22. And I went, that is what I think Motley Crue is worth right there. And my wife and I and a couple of friends went, and it was everything I wanted it to be. They played all the hits. I was laughing my ass off because they were on stage like, how the fuck is everybody? Are you ready to fucking rock and roll? Fuck yeah. I'm like, you guys aren't 19 anymore. What are you doing? You sound like idiots. But I loved it. But it was only worth $22. But so
That's
that's the market rate right
yeah.
now
Or no, that was
for
the market rate for me. I mean, they were
for
charging
you.
50
Okay.
bucks everywhere else, and I didn't think that was worth it. But the whole point was there a point? I guess not. Just getting over
well,
or continuing to
I
grow and expand or find different things
but
to relate to.
one of my students just told me a story about Guns N' Roses. I guess they played Atlantic City. Tickets were $350,
Mhm.
350 to 1,000. What end up having to get a hotel room because it's late.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you go, maybe you walk past the casino on your way in. Like those are the $700, $800 night for some people to go see Guns N' Roses. I think it's like,
Well, when you
I
came
mean,
to see me at Atlantic City, Sting was playing there the very next weekend.
right.
And that's a small, like 2,000 person theater. I mean, imagine
Yeah,
seeing Guns N' Roses or Sting where there's not a bad seat in the house. Like,
right. Exactly. Right. It's like, what a fascinating thing, you know?
They're
Yeah,
probably thinking that all of their fans are, pulling money from pensions and stuff at this point. So $350, where we
yeah,
might think like, "Whoa, I would never pay that." They're
looking at
yeah,
paying
their
it like,
IRAs.
that's a car
right,
payment. Yeah.
doing well in Bitcoin. So
Wow. I mean, it's an interesting thing because, like, I feel like some of the music that I listened to as a kid did speak to me, even though now I speak a very different language. And I think it's very funny that that was a song that spoke to me, or that was an artist that I was like, I heard it and went, yes, you somehow get me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I listen back now and I'm like, really? Wow, what does that say about me? You know?
Well, it says
But
you were a kid. There's nothing wrong with
right,
that.
I know. I'm kidding, but like, but there are people who, and it's true. Like some of that stuff, like, well, it's not true. I guess I like Prince. I like Prince and Stevie Wonder a lot. You know, like there were a couple of people in there who were really talented, but then there was a lot of really dumb shit too. That was
Yeah.
just like, oh my god, what was I thinking? But
Oh, and then 1984 hit, and suddenly there was "I Just Called to Say I Love You," and you're like, dude, what the fuck, really?
but like,
You wrote Inner Visions, for fuck's sake.
yeah, I mean, you know, the '80s were tough on everybody. They really were. It was a tough period. It was a tough time. You know.
You know
But,
who
like,
the 80s were the toughest on? Kiss. I mean, you used to wear makeup and now you're wearing glam and glitter and singing all night. Oh, just sad.
Yeah, I think that they made a smart business decision.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
they
I think that that band, if you want to talk about authenticity, I don't know that that band has an ounce of authenticity, and yet they're massive.
they're
And they would
multimillionaires, and
never,
I'm sitting in a basement. And I like
right?
them.
They
I
would,
still like them. I can
and they
still
will
put on the occasional
never,
Kiss song.
right? They would never tell you that it wasn't anything other than a business.
Yeah.
You know, they'd be the first to admit that, which is, and I guess that's the real question, right? I use comedy, you know, like I guess there's a place for Dane Cook, you know,
Mhm.
and then there's also a place for George Carlin, right? There's a place for that, for both of those things, I suppose, right? Because they are, maybe it's a bad comparison, but to me, that's like, you know, authentic stuff versus funny. You know, like Dane Cook is funny, like it's funny, like it's not humor written for me, but I see why it's funny, and sometimes he says things that I laugh at. George Carlin says things that I don't laugh at, and yet I go, "Oh wow, I want to see more of this." You know what I mean? Right? Like there's something
Yeah.
about that, and I guess that they both have a place. I suppose like there's a place for Bon Jovi, and then there's a place for Pink Floyd. You know, like speaking of bands that people will say had a massive impact on their lives. You know, changed the way they thought about things. You know, Marvin Gaye put out that the "What's Going On" record. You know what I mean? And that changed the way people thought about things. You know, and there's a place for that, and then there's also a place for, you know,
Spice
somebody
Girls.
else to, yeah, the Spice Girls to do something completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I just wonder. I wonder what do you know, like when Katie will talk about some of this stuff a lot, like, you know,
Oh,
growing
hold
up
up.
on,
That's for anybody new or it's the Katie Henry Band. Barrett is the musical director for the Katie Henry Band, and
yes.
yeah, so she's a blues artist, and yeah, so
Yeah, these are radio sight gags mentally. Um, but you know, she'll talk about growing up on, you know, the Britney Spears and all that stuff, and just some of the ways that it makes you think, like as an adult, the way that some of the things that it puts in your head, you know. So I do wonder, right? Like what happens to a generation that grows up on, like whether or not I agree with Cardi B or not agree with her about what her stance on things, what does happen to a generation that believes something at 19 that they're going to be adamantly opposed to at 35 when their kids do it? You know what I mean? Like what does that do to, you know what
Well,
I mean? Like, you know, what does that do? You
I think
know?
that's every generation, though, isn't it? Because Elvis was
Yeah,
going to destroy America, then
yeah,
Dylan was going
but
to
does
destroy.
but
I
does
mean,
but
then
aren't
heavy
we
metal.
but isn't it, you know, I mean, when we think about the PMRC
Mm-hmm.
and talk about how they were saying, oh, you know, they're saying fuck on records, what's next? It's like, well, I see what's next. And I was like, you guys were right. Like, you guys were right. It's fucking out of control. Right? Like there is a point at which, like, maybe it is just getting older, right? But there is a point where you're like, right, it's a slippery slope. You know what I mean? It starts with a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and then, you know, 20 years later, it's like I heard the VMAs were basically just softcore porn.
Yeah.
You know,
It's slippery when wet. Bon Jovi reference.
Hey, look at that! My goodness, give that man a cigar.
Do you
But
think
you know
that
what I
music
mean?
will ever get to the point to where it's that, where it's just one obscene thing? I
Well,
mean, visually is one thing.
mm-hmm.
They can only sing about so much, you know, even with the Cardi B and the WAP and all that other jazz. It only has, to me, it would only have so much staying power. Because they said the same thing when Prince, you know, the Two Live Crew and everything else.
Well,
I think
that's
people
what I was
just start
literally just going to
blocking
say
it
is,
out.
is WAP any worse, any different, or any worse than Two Live Crew? Because that was the one that really sent the PMRC over the edge, if I remember
Exactly.
correctly.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder. I mean, is it all really just what's the word? Is it all just the same, right? Relatively speaking, right? Like the whatever damage or whatever effect Two Live Crew had on us, is that the same effect that WAP has on children who were of the same age when we heard Two Live Crew, right? Like, is it because they grew up with it? Is it the effect it has on them the same, right? Or is it actually worse? I feel like kids are a lot more depressed than they were when I was a kid. I feel like kids are a lot more confused than they were when I was a kid. I felt like we were confused, but we were kind of okay with it. Like
I'm
we
actually,
didn't, we didn't expect to not be confused. We kind of understood we were kids, and one day we'd be adults, and we kind of wanted to be adults, right? Like when you were a kid, being an adult was what you wanted to be. Like you wanted that, and now kids don't want that. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't want to be adults. I don't think.
I have two thoughts. One really quickly is that I just started a book today that is talking about specifically teenage girls and how there used to be support systems, and they'd sit on the phone and they'd talk and they'd giggle, and
Yeah.
now, and it's not a social media is the devil book, but it's just saying like what has changed is they stare at their phones. It used to, one line that really stuck out to me is these teenage girls would go to school, and if they felt ashamed of their body or how they didn't look, there was the pretty girl in school, but they got to see that pretty girl burp or smell bad after gym class and like knew she was human. Now on social media, all they see is the perfection, the photoshopped photos, the Instagram models, the influencers. And so you talk about kids being depressed. It's really, it's a real thing that they are depressed because there's no
Yeah.
reality. It's all surreality. But the other thought I had is, and it's about all three of us. Mike, maybe I shouldn't include you because you weren't talking. I'm going back at Barrett. But one thing we have to be careful of is the Breakfast Club. Right now, if we start complaining about kids these days, we become the assistant principal. And I think we want to be the janitor,
Right.
Carl, where it's, like kids didn't change. You did.
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I'm ultimately complaining or giving them shit.
Yeah. Okay,
I
fair enough.
feel
That's why I say we
know,
want to tread carefully is all I'm
but
saying.
but
So
I
that we
hear what
don't-
you're saying. I mean, it is an interesting it's an interesting thing. I wanted to address something else you said, and then you sidetracked me with that part and maybe not.
That's what I do.
Forget it. It's your fault. You made me forget it.
There's the youth speak right there.
There it is. That's how I get in touch with the youth, right?
Yep.
there.
You blame instead of take
You made
responsibility.
me feel something. It's your fault. I it is an interesting thing, right? Like you get to that point where you become the person who needs to be taught how to program the VCR, right? Like but to bring this full circle, I think that this is why art needs to be authentic, right? Like there's a reason why people go to comedy clubs because they want to get away from something for a minute. I think partially, like they want to be transported somewhere, right? And I feel like there's a real need for that, and I think we have to keep that in mind, whether or not we're doing. Boy, isn't airplane food disgusting? Right? Or that stuff, or doing some deep, meaningful stuff, whatever. I think as long as we keep in mind that like this is somebody else's, like somebody maybe saved up all their money to come to this show. You know what I mean? Like maybe they don't have a whole lot of money and this is their one escape. Do you know what I mean? Like Dave Chappelle talks about it, where he made a joke about it, where he got up on stage and he got high with the rappers and it shit sucked. He bombed. And some lady's like, Dave, I've been waiting all this money. I saved all this money up. I to come see you and you suck, right? And he's like, yeah, So I'm sorry, but you're not getting your money back, right? And he said that basically I get paid for the attempt. I don't get it's like a stunt man. I don't get paid to be funny. I get paid to try to be funny or something. Whatever. It is amusing, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there's a place in which, like, whether I'm playing a wedding or playing a festival, the wedding is somebody's special day, even if it's the 50th I've played that year or whatever, right? Which would be insane. I don't do that many. Man, I'd have a lot of money though if I did. I should reconsider this. But like the 50th wedding for me, the 50th time I've played I Will Survive, and went, really? At your wedding? I Will Survive? Seriously, have you heard the lyrics? You know what I mean? Right? Like how many times I have to say that at a wedding, or every breath you take, you're like, really?
Yeah.
If you really listen to this song, some of those things. But like that's somebody's special day. And that means that like I have to do right, like do whatever I do with some kind of integrity. And I think maybe if we do that, that makes the commerce part of it somehow okay. If we not okay, not that it needs to be okay, not that anybody's judging us for doing it or not doing it. You know what I mean? But like, well, if I go to a wedding and I do it with some heart, it doesn't suck. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, I can see that I'm being paid to play music with my friends, and I'm getting paid a reasonable sum to play songs that I already know and not have a rehearsal. And I mean, just show up and play stuff that I've played 1,000 times, and it's generally cool and it's good, and we go home and everybody's happy. And maybe that's okay sometimes. I don't know how that ties into whatever, but it just when we're talking about people and depression, it got me thinking that maybe this is the time that we really need art to have heart. Comedy and music and whatever it is. Maybe it doesn't need to have a level of authenticity to cut through the bullshit. If Billie Eilish, have you listened to Billie Eilish? Does your daughter like Billie Eilish?
I tried once, and I think I'm not the target audience.
I mean, listen, but some of her new stuff, you're like, this is some vulnerable stuff. Like, this is like she's like digging, like she's a young person, but she's digging deep.
Last couple albums.
Yeah, like she's digging deep, and she's saying some stuff that, like, you're right. It's not meant for me, but it's not stuff that I don't understand. It's like,
well,
oh,
I mean,
yeah,
teenagers
like,
have real emotions. You can make the joke like,
Right.
I'm not a 14-year-old girl, so I don't like Billie Eilish. Well, 14-year-old girls, as I just said a second ago, are more depressed. They're going through some shit. So if she's speaking to them, more power to her.
Right,
But I
absolutely.
think that, the way music, well, the way art is in general, you're always going to have your candy aisle, cereal aisle type of art. Keith Haring is not a Monet. Cardi B isn't going to be a Miles Davis. There are always going to be people who are going to stand guard to make sure that what is considered art, what is considered something with substance, there's always going to be that. And as the popular artists are now, just like it was in any era, the popular artists that are out there now, they're going to fade. Cardi B can't go on talking about, and I don't want to point her out, it's just WAP is on my head for some reason. She can't go on making that type of music because her audience is going to grow. And as they grow up and become more mature, they're going to break off and go into and discover more mature music and go into another direction. If you're 14 years old and you're listening to Billie Eilish may very well grow into a more mature singer and keep her audience. That's the reason why the Guns N' Roses and the Britney Spears and people of that ilk, they can continue to make music as they do because their audience is maturing as they mature. They can't continue to keep, to sing about the same bubblegum pop stuff. Artists can't continue to just paint the same type of art without having some maturity and some depth to it. And that's the reason why I don't worry about what's going on right now. It's the same thing as it was in the early 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, and so on. And all of those bands that were super popular then, they aren't around anymore. Period.
Hmm.
And that's because their audience says, okay, the hits that I love from them, just I don't relate to that now. I'm a father or a mother with kids or a grandparent with kids. This type of music was cool back then. The people that wanted to go to the concert with you, Nathan, that may have been their best decade or the best period of their lives. So they're like going, okay, this is what I remember. Like the people that had the same hairstyle, the 80 hairstyle. You go to a beauty salon, they'll tell you, oh, they wear those hairstyles because that was the best time they feel in their lives. So they don't ever want to give that up.
Little mini Al Bundys.
Exactly. So I don't worry about art. I don't worry about music. This stuff is going to pass, and they'll end up listening to Jean-Luc Ponty or Pat Metheny or something like that, and discover that and go, oh, okay, wow, this is a whole different genre of music. That's how I got my kids into it. Yeah. Well, my kids started out listening to rap, and I would make them go and find the original music that they stole the beats from. And that's how they expanded their musical taste. So my kids listen to everything.
Well, I'm going to push back just a hair on, and I know you're just using Cardi B as an example, but like, let's say, hey, we have the same mug. Fascinating. I wonder if from a certain light, when you look back at Cardi B in history, is she allowing for women to own a part of their sexuality that previously they were not able to, right? Is she really just like, in a weird way, kind of taking power using the very same tools that men have been using for quite some time, right? Like the male hip hop artists have been talking about their dicks and how good they are in bed and how they make women do this and how they do this and that makes the women give them this, that, and the other thing.
And wasn't she a stripper? So she she's seen the worst side of men and how men act.
Right. And when I listen to her rhymes, the stuff is remarkably, I want to use the word clever, but it somehow seems demeaning. Like, I don't mean clever like in some kind of not good way, but it's smart. Like,
I'm the white guy here, so I will fully admit I don't understand what she's saying. So I don't know if her rhymes are clever or not. I just hear a jumble of I'm like, you're like, I had a moment with my wife yesterday in the car, listening of all things, flipping through the satellite stations, and came across the U2 station, but it was Bono reading a letter. I don't know if you heard he did these. He picks out artists that he likes and writes a love letter to the artist, and then they play one of the songs, and it's a Bono letter, Public Enemy. And I went, oh, fuck yeah, I'm staying on this, where he talks about Public Enemy meant to him. And then they started playing Fight the Power. And I went, oh, okay, is it going to be the good version or the bad version? Good version. And it got to his Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant shit to me. I'm like, he said shit, here it comes, motherfucking man jump. I'm like, and I'm singing in the car, the kids are in the backseat with my wife, and my wife's just like, I don't like this at all. I'm like, come on. So that's where, I don't want to say rap lived and died with me, but like I don't understand Cardi B is where I guess I was going, but give me some Public Enemy and I can rock it. That's my jam. Cardi B, not so much.
I mean, but I think it's funny because I think that when Black people, like the monolithic unit of Black people that all think exactly alike, right?
That's how we view you as white people.
Right. When they listen to rock and metal, they call it kill your mother, kill your father music. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you listen to kill your mother, kill your father music, right? And that's what people call it. That's what it's called sometimes in the Black community, right? And they go, yeah, I can't understand a word those guys are saying all the time. It's like, I can't understand that. Just yelling and screaming and that Cookie Monster voice. And it's like, you know?
I'm not wrong.
And so
a little
it's
guar
funny,
never hurt anyone,
right? But it's funny that like both people argue the same thing about each other.
Oh yeah,
it's from different sides, man.
You know, it's like hilarious. So Let me ask you this. I know we're running out of time,
We're
but
fluid, but yeah, we're getting close to an hour. But we
did
got a couple.
you guys both travel a fair amount? Is this true, Mike? Do you travel a bit as a comic? Are you a road dog like Nathan?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I've been in the past month, I've been in South Carolina, North Carolina, the sticks of Pennsylvania, the sticks of Jersey, and West Virginia, and a few places in between. And I have found that the white people I was told I was supposed to be afraid of are relatively reasonable people. And I came to the conclusion of something that some of my black friends tell me I'm being naive, and I should just stop this dangerous line of thinking, right? And that is that maybe some of the lies that they say about black people that like we as black people know are lies, you know what I mean? And any white people that know black people and have black friends kind of know that they're lies. That there are also lies about poor white folks that we hear too, that are also lies. And those ones don't get questioned, you know, because I was around some of the people that I was supposed to be afraid of. Like I met a woman who we stayed in some little campsite and she was like, oh yeah, I got me a nice trailer and a nice trailer park. And I was thinking, huh, that's fascinating.
Wait, she has a trailer and a trailer park and then an RV. I mean, doesn't that seem
Well,
redundant?
no. Well, no, I think she was just there
She likes
visiting a
wills.
friend. Right. She was the
Oh,
visiting someone. But I mean, but it was an interesting thing because like I was like, right, like she was just a nice person. Like she was talking to me about her trailer and how much she liked it and how she used to live in town. And I'm just some strange black dude that she's talking to while we're standing in line somewhere. And I was like, right, like she's just a person. She's just a human living her life. You know what I mean? Like she's, and I was like, right, but I've been told all these horror stories that I'm supposed to be afraid of her. That she's like some dangerous, like the like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and some shit. They're gonna turn me into chili or something, you know? Right? Like dark meat chili and light meat chili, right? But like I wonder, has that been you guys' experience? I know because like Nathan, you talk about this, and you and one of your white comedian friends was like, "Yeah, but we hear what white people say when there's no black people around, and
mhm.
that shit is terrifying." And so, like, that's a real thing, right? Like, white people when there's nobody else around, maybe say some crazy shit. But like, what has your experience been as a black comic who travels around? Have you found people to, in most places, be reasonable?
Well, the thing that white people say when black people aren't around is 100% true. I have a friend who's Lebanese and Italian, but he looks like a regular Michigan white guy. And so he's in all of these circles of people popping off, and he'll
He's
tell
a
me, he's like, man,
spy.
guess what? You're right, right. I told him, I was like, oh man, you passed. And he'll come back and just relay to me these stories that he hears. And it is the stuff that he says, because these people are, you know, like 1 degree of separation from, you know, to me. But anywhere I've traveled, and I've traveled to some very weird and sketchy looking places. Um, the one thing that I noticed the most is I'm usually the only black person in town that night, and those people come to hear comedy. They're not afraid of me. I'm not afraid of them. Now I'm 6'1", 270 pounds. I'm a big dude. So I think a lot of times people might look at me and be like, okay, we're not physically, we may all be able to take him, but he's going to take a couple of them with us, a couple of us with him. Um, so I don't think people mess with me because of that. But I also know that when I'm on stage and I perform and I'm done, I get a lot of accolades, a lot of kudos, and it's like, hey, cool, high five, thanks, take some pictures, pay me, and I'm out. I'm on the
Hmm.
first thing smoking. I'm not afraid, but my whole thing is those people there that are at the show are there at the show. I might run into someone that wasn't there and might,
Mhm.
you know, question why I'm there. Um, But my biggest thing is I don't go anywhere in fear, but uh, I don't go without any, kind of caution.
Your
You should
radar is
always
up.
be cautious. I'm like that in a black neighborhood. Pardon?
Mm-hmm.
I said your radar is
I'm
up.
sorry. Absolutely. I mean, I'm like that anywhere though. I don't care if it's, a small podunk town or if I'm in Chicago, I'm always going to be on alert. Um, that's just for my safety. I don't see walking through life just blindly like, oh, life is good. You should always be careful. You don't know what's going to break out. So the idea that I'm any more safer in Atlanta, Georgia, as I would be in Atlanta, Michigan, that's silliness.
Mm-hmm.
Let me piggyback off Barrett's question because it just popped into my head. Do either of you feel the pressure that Barrett and I've talked about it a little bit, the pressure of being ambassadors for the monolith that is the Black community? When you go into these places, it's like, ooh, we've heard about them and seen them on the news. And is there a pressure to, okay, let's allow them to ease into this situation of, holy shit, Black people are people too? Or is that you're just going to be you and you're likable, and people that aren't going to like you anyway? Or what does that go through your head? Is that a pressure, or is that a shit, now I'm representing the entire Black community, fuck, I have to, any of those thoughts?
Boy, it's like that for me every every day of my life.
Hmm.
That's my walk every day, whether I'm performing, whether I'm going into a supermarket, whether I'm going into a clothing store. I'm always I always go in with the mindset that I can't look big. I can't I even when I talk to people, I start out very soft voice because I have a booming voice. And I'm a big bald black dude walking into a business. That could scare the shit out of a lot of people. So
Well,
when
they
I
think
go
you're
in, I
Suge
joke
Knight.
with them. Right, exactly. Exactly.
When did he get out
I
of
will
jail?
hang you out the window by your ankles type of thing. But I do. I speak very softly. I joke with them. I smile. And it's not a, you know, some kind of routine step and fetch it
It's
type
not an
of thing.
affectation.
I understand
yeah.
that, right, that people can be fearful, especially now in this climate where you don't know what you could say to set someone off. So I'm always joking with people. When I'm in a restaurant, I kid with the wait staff and I leave a big tip because I've heard, oh, I don't like serving Black people because they don't tip well.
Oh, it's
I
out
do
there.
feel
That's one of the,
sometimes.
yep, that's a stereotype. That's a
Yeah.
rumor. That's a
Yeah.
thing.
So I do feel in a lot of ways that I have to represent, represent my clique.
Generally, when Barrett's light starts falling over, we realize we've made God angry, and that's a signal.
Well, one of the things I'll say this, because what you're saying it's actually a fascinating thing because I understand it completely. I think it's a weird holdover from caste and shit like that. It's also a weird
Yes.
holdover from like old racist practices, right? Like the reason why I subconsciously feel like I speak for all Black people is because black dudes used to get murdered for shit other Black dudes did, right?
Right.
All
Yeah.
the time.
Right.
Right?
Oh,
There's
yeah.
like a
Yep.
regular thing. Like we don't know who did it, so we'll get you'll do, right? So there's this feeling of like if I do something wrong, somebody else might actually have to pay for it in a way
Right.
that is really heinous, right? So there is that. But I also think that's fucking ridiculous that I have to live my life that way, right? I do something similar to what you do. I'm not 6'1". I'm not even 6'1" in heels. And with a fro out like
Barrett's
Fletch.
diminutive.
Right. Yes, exactly. I'm my model height is 5'8", you know. um, but I do something very similar, right? Like I look down, my voice goes up. Hey, how you doing? Right? I my head goes to like I become really not threatening because, and again, it's a holdover from this place of like if white people were uncomfortable, it could be dangerous, right? Like
Right.
it was a dangerous situation. If I made someone uncomfortable, that could like any glance could get you murdered, and maybe not me, but my father for sure.
Mhm.
Any glance would have gotten him murdered. So he taught me that behavior. My grandfather, for damn sure. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
he couldn't, if he didn't say sir after something, he could get killed. Right. Like just the absurdity of the way it is. And I feel like some of that stuff gets taught. So to answer your question, Nathan, yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like I understand that Black people are not a monolith, but I understand that we get treated like one, right? That's changing.
Mhm.
That's one of the things that's changing is like with the whole idea of intersectionality and things like that. But just the idea again, like people jump on Candace Owens. I'm not a Candace Owens fan, right? I don't think she has Black people's best interest in mind. I think what she
Mhm.
says might be true sometimes, but I don't think her end game is helping Black people get out of whatever position they're in.
Right.
That's not her end game, right? To me. But I understand between like people like her that she is proof that the Black community is not a monolith because there are a lot of Black people who really like her. I read some Thomas Sowell and I was like, wow, the man is brilliant. He's brilliant. Some of this stuff is really genius. I don't like the application of it sometimes, but I don't think he's a stupid man by any
Mhm.
stretch.
I
You
think I
know?
told you in the course of the week. I remember we were talking about just in passing Larry Elder, and
Hmm.
I said
Right.
whenever I hear Larry Elder, it always goes like this, like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. No, no, I don't agree with that. Oh, what the fuck are you saying? Like over the course, if you listen to it for 10 minutes, it goes
Right,
from like could
exactly.
be reasonable to like, are you
Right.
fucking kidding
Right.
me?
It goes to something like about getting people and better education, better this, better that, to fucking George Zimmerman deserves a medal because he
Right.
shot a seven. It's just like, what the fuck?
Or the
Like,
the
what are you
one that I heard
talking
recently
about?
that
What
and here's
is
it's like if I step back, I'm like, okay, I can see the point he's making. It's so absurd where he said that you could argue that someone was talking about reparations, and he said, well, you could argue that the slave owners deserved reparations because they lost property. And it's like, you could argue that if you are the worst person on the planet, if you
I
are.
mean,
Right.
but here's
Holy
the thing,
shit.
and this is where I start to get angry because all these fucking people who want to talk about this stuff, it's like the slave owners did get reparations. They did.
That, thank
The
you.
government did
I
give
have
them
argued
money.
this for the
Oh,
last
I
three
Right.
never.
days with
Yeah, the
friends of
government
mine.
did give them money and
They
gave
did.
them
They got
gave
$300
them
a slave.
right.
Holy
They
shit.
got they
Well,
got
there you
real
go.
money back then, and they got their land back, and they got put back in power after they when they should have been beheaded. But in any other
Yeah.
sane place, you take your enemy that seceded and tried and killed half your friends and family, and you behead them, and you stomp the head off that snake and go on with your life, which is what in every other revolution we've done. Here, no.
Mhm.
They fully expected to be beheaded and they got put back in power, got their land back, got a bunch of money, then started Jim Crow.
So the
That's when all the
fact he said
murdering
that is
started.
beyond absurd.
Right. It's literally.
Mhm.
But that and it's like and
Well,
that's when all the murdering started.
I
Do you
wonder
know
if the
what I
election
mean?
results have come in, by the way, because we are recording on Tuesday to anybody listening. But yeah, I wonder if the election
Oh.
results are in for California yet.
Oh, do you think he's gonna win? Does he have a what do you think's gonna happen?
I have no idea. I don't pay any attention to it. I think with the last minute push, there's enough of a vote for no that nothing will happen. It's what an absurd system, though. Well, let's not go on another tangent. Let's start wrapping up. But and the idea that they do a recall, and if the recall measure passes, then the person with the most votes wins, even if it's not a majority. Like if Larry Elder gets 10 more votes than Caitlyn Jenner, even though only 2 million people voted in the recall, he's the governor. Like it, what an absurd. Anyway. All
I
right, well, let's
mean,
start wrapping things
yeah.
up. Mike, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I
Yeah,
really
Man,
enjoyed
thanks for
talking to
having
you.
me. This was a lot of fun. I wish
Well, I
we
hope
had more time.
I hope we didn't interrupt you. We should have you back because we like to keep it at about an hour, so it's not too long. But
Yeah.
I just
But
phenomenal,
No, I really
phenomenal.
but
enjoyed it.
before
Thank you
before
guys.
we do that, I mean, I don't know if this is public knowledge. I suppose Nathan, you can cut this out and put the little thing there. You mentioned that you were setting up a space to do a podcast. Is this true? And is this public knowledge? And
Yes.
what is this podcast going to be about? And where can people find
I
it?
Yeah, we were going to
It's
start.
not
This is
out
how
there
we wrap
yet.
up. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
promote
not out there
yourself.
yet.
Basically, this is the self. So talk about MikeGeeter.com or your web, your whatever you want. This is the closing out promote yourself segment.
Yeah, if people want to check out some of my stuff, they can go to Mike Geeter, MikeGeeter.com. I'm on the Book of Faces, Instagram, all of that stuff. The podcast is in the works. I haven't nailed anything down yet, but it's going to be fire, like everyone else's podcast. It's going to be fire.
Well, by the way, I quickly apologize. I gave you the hard G when I introduced you up front. I gave you.
No, it's fine. It's fine, man. Listen, I get called far worse than that.
Well, I get.
So it's cool.
The reason I do it is because I'm German and I hate it when people French up my name. They say Timmel and I'm like, exactly. But if I hear everyone go Timmel, I'm like, no, don't fucking French up my name. So that's what I did with you is I hit that hard because that's so. All right. So AntarGoodwin.com and KatieHenryMusic.com
Absolutely.
for Mr. Barrett Antar Goodwin. We haven't talked about this in a while, but bass lessons online. Anybody listening that's like, you know what, I should play the bass. You can do that over Zoom wherever you are. I think I saw like we had a listener somewhere absurd, like Slovenia or something. Like I looked at them like,
Oh,
how the fuck did we get like? But if you are in Slovenia and you want to take bass lessons, so go to antargoodwin.com.
Absolutely.
I am at nathantimmel.com. You can find all things me there.
Hey, didn't you just write a book?
No, that was months and months ago.
Oh, okay.
But it is out. It's called We Are 100 and people are liking it. And I just had an interesting, this will be the closing of that, an interesting moment today. And then we'll sign off. I had lunch with my wife and a sports reporter, a reporter from the local newspaper. And after my wife left, he had 5 more minutes to kill. She had to get back to work. And he talked about, just completely randomly, the most popular news article he'd ever written. And it happened to be about a comedy show in Iowa City that went off the rails because Norm Macdonald did a horrible, filthy show that, not horrible, but, horribly filthy. People were apparently 80% of the audience left. The 20% that stayed loved it, but people were walking out. And I thought it was just interesting that we talked about that. I get on my bike, I go riding. 10 minutes later, I get a text, Norm Macdonald died. And I'm like, that's just fucking weird because I haven't talked about Norm Macdonald in forever. And he just brings up this article. And so obviously I get back and he's got a message like, holy shit, Norm Macdonald. I'm like, yeah, I know. I found out while I was riding my bike. Write an article about Donald Trump right now. And then you and I are going to talk about that article and cross our fingers. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And we will talk at you next week.
Indeed.